All right, it's another week here at WERW Real College Radio. Hopefully y'all can hear us if I put the right microphones on. It's because it's been a week. We had a week off last week because of COVID here at Syracuse University. But now we're back. The Chips Podcast, Tyler Melito, joined as always by my friend and yours, Mr. Ryan Amick. Ryan, how are you?
Doing great. Good to be back in the studio. I feel like I've said that like 3 times now, but we always in and out of here. Yeah. It'd be nice to have one straight schedule where we just stay in here. That would be nice. Consistent or flexible here in this year. But we're going to start off the show. We got some NFL to talk about, specifically last night. Another doubleheader. I could get used to having.
Are you liking that doubleheader?
I mean, yeah, I couldn't watch the first game because I had class. So in that sense, I don't like it. But I mean, I'm always down for 2 football games on a Monday. As long as it doesn't interfere with my class schedule, I don't have a problem with it.
See, what was great for me is that my teacher encouraged us to watch the Buffalo Bills Kansas City Chiefs game during our class, partially because he wanted score updates. Really? And we were just doing a group project, or class project, so neither here nor there. It was good for my fantasy team, I'll say, watching that game. But we'll start with that game. The Buffalo Bills taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. That game was originally supposed to be played last Thursday. Ended up getting moved to Monday because the Bills' schedule getting shuffled around. It was a whole thing. Ultimately, Kansas City came out with a 26-17 win, moving to 5-1 on the year. Bills dropped to 4-2, 2 straight losses in a game that was played in the rain, but it wasn't even like a slog. It was kind of just like a drizzle. It didn't even look like any of the players really wanted to be out there. They just wanted to be inside, nice and warm with a cup of hot cocoa.
Well, it didn't seem like any of the Bills defenders wanted to be there because they got ran over all game long by the Chiefs offense. And one of the scariest things, if you are a proponent of the Chiefs, or if you're someone like a Ravens fan who will most likely see them in the postseason, you're scared of games like this because Patrick Mahomes, don't get me wrong, 21 for 26, 225 yards, 2 touchdowns. Great stat line, but that's not MVP prime Mahomes from 2 years ago type numbers, and that's because they didn't really need it because they still got a 9-point victory, even with Mahomes just kind of coasting, still getting 2 touchdowns and great stats, only a couple incompletions, but they relied heavily on the run game, specifically with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who will probably be the biggest workload he gets with Le'Veon Bell being signed during the week. He didn't play against the Bills because it was a short week. Just got on the team. Next week, he most likely will suit up for Kansas City. That will be exciting to watch for. But in this game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was still the primary back. Got 26 carries for 161 yards. He's been great as a runner because when he was drafted, a lot of people liked how in the pro-style offense he was great after the catch. He was a good third down running back. But in the NFL so far, he's been he's been a ground pound type of running back who's breaking up a lot of yards on the season.
The one area where he struggled is in goal line situations. He hasn't been able to really punch it in. He has 1 touchdown on the year, Edwards-Helaire does, and that was from like a 21-yard touchdown or something like that. But otherwise, though, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be interesting to see how he plays alongside Le'Veon Bell. Chiefs management has said that Bell is merely there to be kind of like a support to Edwards-Helaire, not supplant him as a starter. It's the Edwards-Helaire show as a running back, but it'll be interesting to see you add another weapon to an already dynamic Chiefs offense who wasn't really at his top on Monday night. Patrick Mahomes had 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. Demarcus Robinson had the most yards on the team with 69 on 5 catches. Travis Kelce had the 2 touchdowns for the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill had only 3 catches for 20 yards. So the fact that arguably a top 5 receiver in the NFL and Tyreek Hill only had 20 yards on 3 catches for the entire game means that this team can only get better.
Yeah, the Bills did a great job locking Hill down, keeping him quiet. They struggled against Kelce. He got 2 touchdowns on the game. His first 2-touchdown game in a couple of years for him, so he had a great game. But a lot of the defense for the Bills, their zone-based defense, a lot of them were sitting back. They had like nickel and dime packages where a lot of people were just sitting back hoping not to get overthrown by Patrick Mahomes. Like hoping Tyreek Hill is not going to break past the safeties, break a 50-yard touchdown. That's a lot of what their defensive focus was in this game. And as a result, the box was always pretty light for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to run in. Only 6 men in the box on a minority of the plays ran in this game. So that was a big reason why he put up so many yards And like you said, Bell, once he comes, he's definitely going to take some workload away. But when you look at Edwards-Helaire's numbers, he's third in the league in rushing attempts. So they feed him the ball a lot, which equates to second in yards on the season with 505. So he's been a big reason they've been successful, especially in this game on Monday night against the Bills team that's fallen to 4-2 now. We're 4-0 on the season for tough losses against the Titans, who are undefeated, looking like one of the best teams in the league, and the Chiefs. And if you're a Bills fan, having the Patriots lose this weekend was also big for you because you still remained at the top of the AFC East. And with 2 losses to some of the top teams in the league, you don't feel too bad in that sense.
See, now that's actually where I'd be worried because the Bills, they want to perform well against Kansas City, against Tennessee, against Baltimore, although I don't think they play them this year, because these are nice litmus tests to see how the Buffalo Bills stack up to the team. The Bills are the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East through 6 weeks, and if they are unable to win games against Tennessee, win games against Kansas City, win games against Baltimore, etc., I don't have much faith in the Bills making a deep playoff run. And the one other thing with Buffalo, their offense just looked flat. Josh Allen, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was also the team's leading rusher with 42 yards. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss need to step up. That's why I'm so baffled as to why the Bills didn't make a harder push to sign Le'Veon Bell, because their running backs are so bad that Le'Veon Bell, sure, he might not have had great success with the Jets, but I think he's still a great talent, and it's partially because of the Jets' ineptitude on all facets, Jets fans, that they couldn't figure out how to use Le'Veon Bell. So the fact that they didn't make a harder push for him, I think that's going to hurt him in the long run. And ultimately, I think Josh Allen, he's destined to fail at this point, simply because the Bills are putting him in so many, you got to go out and make a play, and a lot of times he does it, but eventually there's going to be one play where he doesn't make it and it costs them a game, or maybe he gets hurt or something like that, and that will set the Bills back big time.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, guys like Singletary are exactly bad running backs or anything. I think Zach Moss has dealt with injuries this year. He is a rookie. Singletary's had big moments in some games and has been dead silent in other games. But obviously the biggest part of this offense runs through Josh Allen. He had his worst game of the season. And when you're versing the defending Super Bowl champions, if your quarterback plays his worst game of the season, it most likely will not work out for you. So this game obviously did not work out for the Bills. I wouldn't be too discouraged look in terms of postseason talk, as you were mentioning. I think, especially come postseason time, they have a strong defense. Hopefully by then they get the running back situation figured out, and one of the backs that emerges as the lead back for them. Josh Allen, as long as he plays like any other game he's played this year, they should be fine. The past couple weeks have been tough for him, but they have... Who do they have next week?
The Bills have...
I thought they had the Jets.
I think they might actually be on their bye week next week because of the schedule got reshuffled.
No, they face the Jets next week.
They do?
So that's should be easy win to get back on track for them. So yeah, Bills fans, tough past 2 weeks against really tough opponents on a short week too. I mean, the past 7 days.
But they had 6 days to prepare. It would be as if they had a game on Sunday and they were playing Monday night. Last week they played Tuesday against the Titans. They played Monday night. So it's really not like a short week compared to what they were originally supposed to have Sunday to Thursday.
Yeah. So Bills losing that one, 26-17. That was not the only game that night. Also have
it felt like the only game because the other one was a complete
it was hard to watch, even as a Giants fan who likes to see the Cowboys miserable. That game was still very hard to watch. Awful game for the Cowboys, who sit atop of the NFC East at 2-4.
It's such a bad division.
I can't believe it hasn't evened out by then. Like when the season first started, when we were 3 weeks in, and the Cowboys were 1-2 in the top division, I was like, all right, that's just a slow start to the season. Maybe some team will start picking up some wins. One win has come about since, and the top team has... Every team in this division has 1 win except the Cowboys, who have 2, which is just... It says a lot about this
and what
conference
that
we talked about multiple times on this show before. It's historically bad conference that's probably going to have a team with a losing record in the playoffs, hosting a playoff game. So
that's such a pathetic thing.
Which is why a lot of people have tried to change the playoff format, and they have a little bit this year, adding a 7th team to the mix. But some people are proponents of having having it divisionless. So
that makes no sense.
Well, so having conference the same, but having the 7 best teams in the conference, like an NBA
Then
style.
what's the point of having divisions to begin with?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm
sense.
in favor of it, but it makes sense in situations like this because that way a team like the Cowboys, if they do win the division, they don't get to make the playoffs because what if they're 6-10, but they win a division? So they host a playoff game, and on any other year, this would be one of the worst teams in the league, a 6-10 team.
Technically, they still won their division, although it is atrocious.
It is a train wreck, and a lot of that has to do, obviously, Dak Prescott no longer with the team. Andy Dalton, some people were saying best backup in the league. Having him as a security blanket would be great for this team. He could step in right away and do wonders for them. But that did not translate, that's for sure, last night. Throwing two interceptions on the night. Also, Zach Martin went down with an injury for the offensive line, who's already without Tyron Smith. And
Joe Looney.
And without Joe Looney. La'el Collins, Travis Frederick retired in the offseason. So this O-line is a shell of what it used to be, which is why Zeke has looked so bad as well. He had 2 fumbles last night, back-to-back.
Those aren't necessarily in the O-line, though. The first
one...
No,
I'm saying Zeke is... Yeah. He's really... His true colors are coming out because the O-line is no longer there and Dak's no longer there. So it's all on him to make production. Didn't get 50 yards yesterday and had 2 fumbles. So not the type of game you need from Zeke, not only this week, but pretty much the rest of the season. As they do have playmakers on offense still. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Gallup. Great skills position players. But the rest of their offense is in ruins right now with all these injuries and loss of time for players. So guys like Zeke really need to step up in weeks coming up because on Monday night he really struggled.
You know what my issue with the Cowboys was? Who, by the way, it has since came out that multiple Cowboys players ripped the Cowboys coaching staff, including head coach Mike McCarthy, who, by the way, was considered to be a great fit for this team. Coming in as a new head coach replacing Jason Garrett, they thought he could be the missing piece to leading this team to a Super Bowl. Obviously, that's not the case. But here's my issue. Andy Dalton threw the ball 54 times. 54, had 266 yards. You know how many carries Ezekiel Elliott had? I know you do because it's in front of you. 12. 12 for 49 yards. You know how many targets he had in the passing game? 11. He had 8 catches. 23 touches for arguably the best running back in football right now in Ezekiel Elliott. That's just unacceptable, in my opinion. How can you let Andy Dalton, your backup quarterback, in his first start of the season throw 54 times and not give the ball to your star running back more than 30 times?
And it really makes Zeke look expendable, especially when you have someone like Tony Pollard, who a lot of people have been high on ever since the Cowboys drafted him. They've given him some carries. They gave him 10 carries last night, so he is getting some production. And if you get more out of Tony Pollard, that makes Zeke expendable because of that huge contract he got last offseason. If they were to try to look to trade someone, Zeke might be that guy because this offense is a wreck, and he's not doing much to help.
And they need cap space because they got to sign Dak Prescott.
Especially if they want to keep Dak on this team. They might have to pick between Dak and Zeke, and right now it's clear as day that Dak means more to this team because as soon as he goes down, they turn into a dumpster fire, and as soon as Dak goes down, Zeke is nowhere to be found.
I mean, as a Giants fan, I would love them to trade Ezekiel Elliott, but as a football fan, I'd be screaming at my television if the Cowboys traded Ezekiel Elliott away because it's just an inept move by a franchise who has not made a conference championship since 1996. If you have a top player at his position, you got to keep him at all costs. And the Cowboys have now shot themselves in the foot. They gave contracts to guys who probably not necessarily didn't deserve them, but they prioritized other players ahead of their stars in Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott, and now they're playing catch-up. They got Zeke, the big deal. Dak Prescott, they could franchise tag him again next year, and he'll still make $37+ million when they should have signed him to a long-term contract 2-3 years ago.
One thing the Cowboys do have going for them, though, is they might be the most newsworthy team ever because we just spent 5 minutes talking about how they got creamed, whereas we have not talked about the Cardinals yet, who did the creaming, 38-10 victory over the Cowboys. And when you look at the stats, it's honestly kind of surprising because this was not the best offensive showing from the Cardinals, especially through the air. Kyler Murray, 9 for 24. They had 2 touchdowns, but not a single receiver had more than 3 catches on the day.
And that was Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
Ageless wonder, Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah, Christian Kirk got a big touchdown in this game. He had both receiving touchdowns in this game, and D-Hop had 2 big catches, but 2 receptions for D-Hop is a very quiet
On 8
night
targets,
for him.
too, which is not...
Yeah. But, again, on the ground, Kenyon Drake versus Ezekiel Elliott, Drake destroyed that matchup, which was horrible for my fantasy team.
Great for my fantasy
celebrating.
team.
I lost because of that.
I won
very
because of
upset
it.
because he's been very mediocre this year, but he was anything other than that last night. 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. He definitely won the matchup duel at running back against Zeke. And also Kyler Murray picked up 74 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He's been pretty much a less successful and tinier version of Lamar Jackson in the sense that his game is almost predicent on his running ability now,
Yeah.
and that's what he looks to do more. He ran more times than he had completions in this game. But hey, it worked for the Cardinals. They got a big win over a bad defense in the Cowboys. But nonetheless, the Cardinals now move to 4-2 on the season. They're tied for second in their tough division that has the Seahawks undefeated at the top, the Rams and Cardinals at 4-2, and the Niners now at 3-3.
They turning things around. They had a big win against LA.
But I think the Seahawks will win its division, but any of those 3 teams could make a wild card spot.
All 4 teams can make the playoffs in that division given the new format, which would be actually pretty fun to watch.
I don't think that's going to happen because of teams like the Bears and like the Bucks and Saints and stuff like that. But yes, any team in that division could win. And
Well, the Bears, I think, are going to drop off. I don't think they're legit.
I think they'll
yet.
drop off, but at 5-1, it's hard to not make the playoffs with a good start like that.
Yeah, it is. They can lose 9 straight, 10 straight, whatever it is.
Yeah, if you go by those standards, yeah. That's true. But those were the 2 games from last night to take note of. One of the better games of the week, though, I wanted to quickly mention before we go into break, is Texans-Titans, a divisional matchup that went into overtime. And what a monster game. Talking about running backs, top of the league. We talked about the wrong one because Derrick Henry is looking like the best back in the league right now.
212 yards on 22 carries, plus 2 touchdowns, including the game winner in overtime. And I chose to draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Derrick Henry because I thought Derrick Henry, he had too much work after last season, leading the league in rushing yards. He is monster. Oh my God.
You didn't even mention the other touchdown was a 94-yarder.
Oh yeah, that too, late in the game to give the Titans the lead.
He has to have, at least in recent memory, the most 90-plus yard runs I can think of.
He
has 2 against the
one,
Jaguars and now 1 against the Texans. He always does it against his division rivals too.
I mean, it puts fear in their heart. Also, point and note, A.J. Brown, who has been hurt for most of the year, he had 2 touchdowns as well. So it seems like the Titans are now starting to figure it out. They got a nice ground game with Henry, obviously. Tannehill's throwing the ball 4 touchdowns, 1 interception for 364 yards. They got their top wide receiver in Brown going again. And their defense, although they let up 36 points, they still look pretty darn good against their division foe. And they're now one of 3 teams that's undefeated. They're 5-0. Tennessee is legit, I think.
I love the job Mike Vrabel has done as well because he's kept that exotic smash mouth type of football that was set in place under previous head coaches like Mike Mularkey and when Matt LaFleur were on the team. They called this team, their offense, how this was exotic smash mouth, how it was a different form, a new age version of the run game where they run it up the middle almost every time but do also a different type of plays to put it in the mix. But Mike Vrabel, ever since he took over as head coach, he's kept that identity. He's fed Derrick Henry. As soon as Mike Vrabel became head coach, Derrick Henry became the primary point of this team. It went from DeMarco Murray, who was a previous free agent signing, took over the reins to Derrick Henry, who's been one of the best backs in the league the past 3 years. And this year, he leads the league in rushing attempts, leads the league in rushing yards, and is tied for second in touchdowns. So he's one of the best backs in the league statistically this year. And if you just look at some of the highlight plays he's had some of those like MVP highlight moments, the stiff arm on Josh Norman, the 94-yard touchdown run, and then in the same game, the game-winning touchdown in overtime. On top of that being a 200-yard game, and the fact that the Titans are 5-0 on the season, and this is all building on his postseason where he took the world by storm and got the Titans pretty much single-handedly to the AFC Championship game. So that, on top of what he's doing right now, on top of the league-leading rushing year he had last year, is establishing Derrick Henry as not only the most important part of this Titans team, but one of the best backs in the league.
I will say, are you worried that eventually it's all going to catch up with Derrick Henry and he's just going to run out of steam, basically, whether it be his body gives up from all the hits and all the work he gets, or teams just start figuring it out? and they figure out a way to stop him. Are you worried about that at all?
If they do stack the box and try to game plan to stop Derrick Henry, then they have Ryan Tannehill, who's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league the past year and a half, with guys A.J. Brown back in the mix. Jonnu Smith, who's been a lead guy for them, especially at the tight end position. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season, which is one of the league leaders amongst tight ends. They've been great through the air and on the ground. And Derrick Henry's only 26. He only really started getting a heavy workload 3 years ago, like I said, when they took the reins from DeMarco Murray to Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry's been the lead back on this team for only a couple of years now.
He also had a big workload at Alabama, too.
He did, but that's the case. You can say that for almost every running back in the league. And he's such a big bruising back. I mean, he's 6'3", 247. That's like a smaller version, obviously. This is a bad comparison, but I'm just thinking of like how LeBron James has been so durable at that type of size. He's like a shorter version of LeBron. So if I feel like that will help him stay durable, even if they do run him 25 times a game.
All right.
Which they should do because it works.
I figured I'd ask. One other point I'd note, the Texans, although losing, Deshaun Watson finally seemed to get things going this season after a slow start. 335, 4 touchdowns. Will Fuller, 6 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. Watson on my fantasy bench. Didn't hurt me at all, but just figured I'd point that out. Let's look ahead quickly to Week 7. What's the game you are most excited for next week?
Well, staying with the Titans, they have a matchup against the Steelers that's going to be a very fun one to watch. 2 of the 3 undefeated teams left in the NFL squaring off next week. And you look at the Steelers, they got one of the best defenses in the league. They lost Devin Bush this week to a torn ACL, who'll be done for the season. That hurts them, but the rest of their defense has still been on par. They just scraped the Browns. They, as I said, are undefeated on the season. James Conner has been pretty decent for them. Big Ben has been huge having him back. The receivers are getting fed. Chase Claypool coming out of nowhere with a 4-touchdown game last week. And Juju Smith-Schuster has definitely recovered from an off year last year. Deontay Johnson, James Washington, young receivers that look promising for the Steelers. This offense is solid. The defense is one of the best defenses in the league. And it's one of the top 5 run defenses in the league, which is why this matchup should be very interesting. Because as you said, if teams like the Steelers look to stack the box and stop Derrick Henry, which they might be able to do, because if any defense in the league can do it, Steelers is one of the ones that could do it. So if they do neutralize Derrick Henry in that sense, it'll be interesting to see how Ryan Tannehill can capitalize off of a 4-touchdown performance this week, 364 yards. He played great. Can he do it again against a much better and more intimidating secondary in the Steelers? I really can't wait for that matchup.
Great matchup. That was also rescheduled from Week 4 to now because of COVID. Game I'm most looking forward to, and I'll keep this short and sweet, and we'll go to a break. Seattle, Arizona. Seattle, 5-0 on the year, tops of the NFC West. We just mentioned them. And then Arizona, coming off a big win against Dallas. They're at home. This could be a huge game to maybe shift the tides in that division a little bit. Arizona, with a win, could move to 1 game back of Seattle. And these are 2 high-powered offenses if things look to be as they are. Russell Wilson versus Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf. The Seahawks also have Tyler Lockett and Chris Carson. The Cardinals also have Kenyon Drake. So it should be very interesting to watch. Anyway, coming up after the break, we got to start talking about another championship that starts tonight. The World Series. Tampa Bay Rays, Los Angeles Dodgers. Ryan and I will be previewing it, tell you how we got to this point. Should be a lot of fun. So right now, we are going to listen to Morning by Francis and the Lights. You are listening to the Chips Podcast on WERW, Real College Radio. Welcome back. You're listening to WERW, Real College Radio, the Chips Podcast. Tyler Melito, joined once again by Ryan Amick. We just finished talking about the NFL, and now we're going to talk about the World Series starting tonight in Texas. They're playing at Globe Life Park. It's Globe Life Field. Globe Life Field. I just Googled it. The new field for the Texas Rangers, but it's going to be Los Angeles Dodgers, the number 1 team in the NL. They got to this point. We'll talk more about that later by beating the Braves in 7 games. Then you got the Tampa Bay Rays, the number 1 team in the AL this year. They got to this point by beating the Houston Astros in 7 games. So, Ryan, I'll let you lead this discussion because you have a way you want to go about it. So, start us off. Where do you want to go from here, previewing this series?
First off, if you live in Tampa Bay or LA, you're about to get your second title in the month of October because the Lightning, they won the Stanley Cup in beginning of the month, and most recently, the Lakers just won the NBA title.
Yeah.
So you have the LA Dodgers and the Tampa Bay Rays. Who wants another title in the same month? We'll find that out in this matchup. But as you said, this is going to be played at Rangers Field, who are not obviously in the World Series.
Doing a bubble.
So because of the whole bubble format, so this will be the first ever World Series at a neutral site, which is pretty interesting. And it's fitting for the year of 2020 where weird firsts like that will happen. Like weird firsts where the World Series will now just be in a bubble in Texas between an LA team and a Tampa team. But moving on, so excuse me, this is the
You
first.
good over there?
Yeah. This is the first matchup between two number one seeds since 1995, which is pretty interesting. The Rays won the AL at 40-20 regular season, and the Dodgers were 43-17 during the regular season. They were the number one seeds, and if looking at how both these teams got here, they're kind of two different stories. So looking at the Dodgers, as I said, 43-17 regular season, won the NL West for the 8th straight year. They've just been dominating that division in recent memory. They're going to their third World Series in 4 years, still looking to win their first title since '88. Meanwhile, the Rays, this is only their second ever World Series appearance. Last one was back in 2008. They won the AL East for the first time in 10 years, so total opposites there, with the Dodgers controlling the AL West for as long, or the NL West for as long as they have. And the Rays also rely a lot on their pitching, as during the regular season, they were top 3 in wins, saves, and ERA. So a lot of their success is predicated to their bullpen, to their starting pitchers, and to their pitching staff as a whole. So looking at some of their series they've had so far in this playoffs, both teams went to a Game 7 in the Conference Championship Series. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? And because both of those were very entertaining series.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Rays is that they got off to a huge lead. They were up 3-0, and then the Astros won 3 straight games to force the Game 7. And I remember myself thinking, oh my God, the Rays are going to blow it. They're going to lose. The Astros are going to go back to the World Series. Why? Why does baseball hate me like this? Because the Astros cheating, and I honestly want to see them fail as much as possible. Although, then again, the Rays eliminated the Yankees, so I was very mixed emotions in this series. Ultimately, the Rays pulled it out in Game 7, and you mentioned their pitching, but it's the bat of one player in particular this postseason that has really gotten the Rays to this point. Randy Arozarena. Arozarena. I haven't gotten that right once, but he's batting .382, 7 home runs, with a .433 on-base percentage and 21 hits. Best on the team by far. Won the AL Championship Series MVP. And he's going to be a huge factor for them. But just looking at the rest of the team, their team is not a huge power team. They're not going to win by bombing the ball out of the park like the Dodgers might, more so. But they're a very complete team, very balanced team. And also, one other point to note that I think is really interesting, the Rays, 28th highest payroll in the league this year. The Dodgers, second. And I'm sure I'll let you recap the NLCS.
All right. So
I'll be nice, you know?
Yeah. So first I want to mention on what you just said, though. 28th payroll compared to the second payroll, Rays, Dodgers, two very different teams in terms of format. And you were also mentioning how there's much bigger bats on the Dodgers side than there are the Rays side, which is why... Now you got me missing out. I had him coming in here.
Arozarena. There we go.
Arozarena has been huge for the Rays because he's really been the only one producing home runs on that type of level. Whereas the Dodgers have Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, Mookie Betts, Max Muncy. I mean, they have a long list of players who could drive the long ball and just create offense in general. I mean, look at Game 3 of the ALCS. They scored 11 runs in the first inning, which is the turning point of that series because the Dodgers were down 0-2 in that series at that point. A record-setting first inning in the playoffs for them helped them cruise past Game 3 and eventually overcome a 3-1 deficit, as you said. Against the Braves team, who you thought was going to make the World Series, and were looking very hot in this one.
I was pissed that the Braves couldn't pull it out. I'll be honest.
Yeah, they choked. They were up 3-1. I mean, it's an Atlanta team, so you kind of had to see this coming. They choked at 3-1.
That is true. I should have thought that through.
Yeah, it's happened
too many times in recent years. Too many times this year. Atlanta has blown big leads in games or series. I mean, it's insane, to say the least. But you mentioned the Dodgers and their bats, and Corey Seager won the NLCS MVP, and rightfully so. He had a huge series helping the Dodgers get back.
Yeah, 5 home runs ain't that bad.
But not at all. But I think the big difference this season compared to last, and I think that's why the Dodgers have a better chance of winning this series, is Mookie Betts. In past years, the Dodgers, they had very solid lineups. They brought in Manny Machado that one year. He couldn't get the job done. Cody Bellinger has emerged into a star. They've had Muncy, Justin Turner, Corey Seager. Mookie Betts is a different caliber of player. He is a straight-up superstar in the MLB. He's batting .311 in this postseason. He is a defensive wizard, top to bottom. This season alone, Betts, .292, 16 home runs, 39 RBIs. Maybe not jumping off the page by any stretch, but remind you, they only played 60 games in the regular season. And I think Betts is set up for a huge contract extension with the Dodgers. He's going to be a Dodger for the rest of his career. I'm calling it right now. And I would not be surprised if he goes off this series because he is that good.
I hate to break it to you, but they kind of are one step ahead of you there. They signed him to a 12-year mega deal before the season even started.
They really?
They knew what they were getting with Betts. They didn't
that's why
they didn't need the season to see that he's one of the best in the league.
My bad.
Yeah, no, it's
been one of those years where you just forget everything that's happened.
Yeah, there's a lot that's been happening, but yeah, they signed him to a 12-year extension at the beginning of the year. He's played great for them this year, especially in the NLCS when they were down 3-1. He made big catches in game 5, 6, and 7 of that series to help bring them back. And his addition to this team has boosted the defensive morale in general because the Dodgers ranked second in defensive runs saved this year. The Rays ranked 5th in that, though. So they're two pretty solid defenses right now. But the Dodgers are even better than ever on defense because of the addition of Mookie Betts. You had Cody Bellinger making a big catch in Game 7 as well. So they've just been making big plays, especially in times when it matters. Because they haven't had many stressful situations. I mean, they hadn't lost a game coming into the ALCS. They swept against the Brewers 2-0, and they swept against the Padres 3-0. So they were cruising coming into this series. Then they go down 2-0, have a big Game 3, as we mentioned, go down 3-1, and then their defense and their bats get them back in it, help them win the series, help them get to the World Series for the 3rd time in 4 years. As they look this year to finally win one, it's been a very long time since the Dodgers have actually won a World Series. They've been to a couple in recent memory, but this is definitely one of their best years to do it because they don't have to face the likes of the Yankees, who a lot of people thought would be their opponents coming into this season.
Or the Astros.
Sure, if it was a normal season, maybe it would have played out that way, but yes, the Yankees and Astros were essentially supposed to be the opponents for the Dodgers, but then the Rays came in, beat both those teams on their way to the World Series, and it's been a big year for them. One of their manager is definitely going to be in the consideration for Manager of the Year, Kevin Cash, yes.
I will say, if the Rays win this World Series, will there be, I wouldn't say there should not be an asterisk next to any World Series, or any championship for that matter, this year because of the pandemic. But I feel like I won't, when looking back on it 20, 30 years now, if the Rays were to win this World Series, I wouldn't hold it in that high esteem simply because of the shortened season. We really would not know how things would have gone in a full 162 game season. Like the Dodgers, even pre-pandemic, were expected to be the World Series champs. They were expected to lead the leagues in wins once again. They're expected to make it to the World Series and possibly win over the Yankees, the Astros, maybe even an AL Central team like the Twins. But the Rays, they were far from it given the construction of their roster. And don't get me wrong, they've had a great season. But do you think, when looking back on this championship, if the Rays were to win, that you wouldn't hold it in as high a regard as other championships because of the shortened season?
No, I don't see why that makes sense. I mean, a lot of people argue that this might be the hardest year to win a championship.
I get what you're coming from.
There's a solid argument to that because this is very challenging. Having all this extra stuff that any other year would never be
a
in
global
consideration.
pandemic being one.
Yeah, it's just never happened any other year. No other team has had to prepare for it or worry about it. And now a team, sure, they play less games, but you look at the Dodgers, they play 10 games, they play 300 games. They're going to make the playoffs. I mean, it doesn't matter. The Dodgers got to the World Series no matter how many games they played in the regular season. It was bound to happen, and it did happen. And you look at the Rays, they had almost 100 wins last year. They were bound to make the playoffs again this year. I don't think the 60-game regular season had any effect on the postseason outcomes. So them being in the playoffs had nothing to do with a shorter season, and they got it done when it mattered in the postseason. So I think that's just more kudos to the players getting through these tough times. I mean, they're even playing it in a World Series for the first time that won't be at their home stadium. They're going to be playing at a totally random location, so no home field advantage in that sense. They're taking away advantages from teams like the Dodgers, who any other year would get a privilege like that for being the best team in baseball in terms of record. So I don't think there's going to be any asterisks on this championship, just like I don't think there should be any asterisks on the Lightning winning or the Lakers winning. They won their titles in a very tough year. Whoever wins this World Series goes down as World Series champions for 2020, no matter what anyone thinks about it. And arguably, this is one of the harder years to be an athlete because of all the extra stuff you have to worry about on top of actual gameplay.
Fair enough, indeed. Let's preview Game 1 specifically here tonight. It looks like it's going to be Tyler Glasnow on the mound for the Rays, who looked very good against the Yankees in that series, and then continue that up with a solid series against Houston, against Clayton Kershaw, the guy who has been dubbed as a playoff choker despite all of his regular season success. I would assume the edge goes to the Dodgers here simply because Kershaw is still Kershaw, right?
Yeah, so Kershaw, he's obviously a Hall of Famer, but he struggled in the playoffs undoubtedly, especially in World Series. You look at his stats, 5.4 ERA and a 1-2 record in the World Series is nothing like what you'd expect from an ace like Clayton Kershaw. Nonetheless, he's still their primary ace, their top pitcher, and he will be suiting up for Game 1 in a big pitching matchup against Tyler Glasnow, who's arguably the Rays' top pitcher. But then you look at some of the other matchups that will go on in the series. Game 2, most likely Walker Buehler versus Blake Snell, and then Julio Urias versus Charlie Morton in Game 3. Those are very good pitching matchups, all 3 games that we can see. I'm really looking forward to that. And I think in terms of Game 1, given Kershaw's sketchy past, given that the Rays have a little more of a rest in their bullpen because
they have the one extra day.
They had an extra day, and in Game 7, they used their bullpen more than anything.
So are the Dodgers, though.
Hmm?
So are the Dodgers. Justin May only had 1 inning. Tony Gonsolin only had a couple innings, and then they went to the bullpen.
So they should be both well rested. That shouldn't help one team. They should be all set for this matchup. I think the Rays catch them off guard in Game 1 because the Dodgers are favored in this series. I think they're minus 205 to win the World Series. I think the Rays get them Game 1.
Minus 157, according to ESPN. But
that's for, I think, today's game. I'm talking.
You're right,
I'm talking the whole series minus 205, and yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Rays take this one. I think the Dodgers will ultimately win the World Series, but I think the Rays will make it close, and I can easily see it going 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, I agree. As Ryan is hocking up a loogie over there. I mean, what's going on? Get this man some water, please. Yeah, I think the thing with the Dodgers, ultimately, they are the better team top to bottom, and that's partially because they have the larger payroll. I mean, this is ultimately where it's going to catch up to the Rays. They got better bats, they got better depth, better pitchers, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing you can't count out is you can't count out grit. You can't count out heart. That's why I think the Rays will make this a series. And let's be real, all they need is one solid start from either Snell or Glasnow in the first 2 games, and the Rays have a legitimate chance of winning this series. If they can keep things 1-1 after 2 games, I think the Rays will be in a great spot. If they go down 2-0, I don't like their chances.
Well, and that's why I think they could go up as early as Game 1 in this series because Glasnow is definitely have a better playoff reputation than Kershaw. So if they can get a good game out of Glasnow and get the Game 1 victory, that's going to change the whole series for them because the Dodgers will definitely be on their toes. And also, you look at this matchup, this team is somewhat similar to last year's champions in the Nationals in the sense that they have 3 aces, essentially, as starting pitchers. As I mentioned before, Glasnow, Snell, and Morton, all solid all-star caliber pitchers for them. Just like
Former
last
Cy
year.
Young winner and Snell?
Yeah. Snell, is he the only one, or did Morton win one?
I'm pretty sure Snell, but I could look it up.
Yeah, look that up. So they have 3 Cy Young caliber pitchers. The Nationals last year also did. Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Patrick Corbin. those were the heart and soul of how they won last year, how they upset the Dodgers and ended up winning the World Series last year.
Morton does not have a Cy Young.
Morton does not have Cy Young, but Blake Snell does, and Glasnow and Morton are still solid pitchers. And, yeah, I think that's going to be huge for the Rays in this one. It's going to be definitely a key for their victory if they are to win this series. And also, both teams are just hitting really hot right now. Like, you look at the lineups, obviously the Dodgers have more name-brand players and just honestly better hitters in general. But look at the Rays. Obviously, Randy Arozarena, 7 home runs in the playoffs so far, 4 in the series against the Astros where he was named the MVP. He's obviously on fire. Then you have guys like Brandon Lowe, who throughout the regular season was the lead hitter for this team in every category. Batting average, home runs, RBIs. He was the guy. He was the main guy for them during the regular season. Randy's come up big for them in the playoffs. And then other guys have been getting bats going as well. I mean, you look at Mike Brousseau. He had the Game 5 home run against Aroldis Chapman that brought him to the ALCS.
Turn the knife in my heart a little bit more.
No, I feel you, man. That's 2 years in a row now. Talk about the Yankees real quick. Chapman needs to get his act together because that's 2 seasons in a row have ended because he gave up a home run in a playoff game, do-or-die situation. So if we're going to pay him all this money as a closer, he needs to close. Mm-hmm. Sure, he's not the only problem with this team. They had injuries all season long. Really, they got healthy right at when playoffs came about. But they versed the Rays, who during the regular season had their number almost every time they faced each other. The Rays won the regular season series against the Yankees. They won the postseason series against the Yankees. This is the Rays' year in terms of that because the Yankees are not to where they could be. And that's why I think the Rays are in the situation they are right now. Because the Yankees were not ready this year. The Astros couldn't get it done against the Rays. The Rays were able to get it done this year so far. So if they could get some guys just hitting more than average, I guess you could say. Just get some of the bats going. I think they have a real chance in this one.
So, let's give predictions. I'm going to give my prediction as the Dodgers are going to win this series in 6 games. And my player to watch, who I think is going to be crucial for the Dodgers to win, sure, you can go Kershaw. Sure, you can go Bueller. Sorry, had to make the reference, even though I've never seen the movie. You could go Mookie Betts, but my player to watch is Cody Bellinger. The guy is a great talent. He is one of the best. He's a former MVP, former NL Rookie of the Year. Probably could win MVP again this year in the NL. Who knows? But he hasn't performed on the biggest stage in the World Series. He's had multiple cracks at it. Maybe third time's a charm for him. I think he will have a big series for the Dodgers if they want to win. Ryan, what's your prediction?
I also think the Dodgers.
You almost said the Lakers.
I know because I was relating it to the Lakers because I think the Dodgers will win in 6, like the Lakers won in 6.
Okay.
And I think as I mentioned, I think they might lose Game 1 tonight, and after that regroup, win the majority of the games. It could go to 6 or 7 games. I think the Dodgers ultimately will win the series. And someone I'm really looking forward to is Corey Seager, who just came fresh off an NLCS MVP, had 5 home runs in that series. He's been on fire, but he also led the Dodgers in batting average and RBIs during the regular season. He was one of the top home run hitters. So he's one of the top bats on this team. He's a solid defender at shortstop as well. He could be a big player in this series, but they have just so many X-Factor type guys, like you mentioned with Cody Bellinger. He has not had a great postseason. He can turn it on like that, and then he is so dangerous and someone you really have to deal with if you're the Rays. But they just have so many people like that on the roster, not to mention Mookie Betts. I mean, the Dodgers obviously have the more talented batting lineup and arguably more talented pitching. So it's really hard if you're a Rays fan. You're definitely the underdogs in this one. It gives a lot of that Heat Lakers vibes where it's one team going into the season, everyone expecting them to be here. They've followed every step so far. They've gotten to this point, and they have more of the talent. Whereas the Rays and the Heat had more of the heart, more of the underdogs, more of the don't have to pay as much to win, especially in the Rays sense. As you mentioned, 28th in payroll, and they're facing the second team in payroll. I mean, the Rays in this one definitely are the underdogs, so I would,
And I think that's the mindset that manager Kevin Cash and the rest of that coaching staff need to tell this team is, hey, all the pressures on the Dodgers because they're expected to be here at the beginning of the season. They're expected to win the series. So let's just play Rays style of baseball, and maybe we could sneak out one here and win our second World Series. But ultimately, Ryan and I are going to go with the Dodgers in 6 games, which means 10/27, October 27th. That's when we think the series will end, the baseball season will end. But got to start with Game 1. Game 1 tonight, October 20th at 8:11. That's when the first pitch is supposed to be thrown on Fox. Should be a good one. We're going to take a quick break, close out the show, and I don't know what we're going to talk about. Maybe Syracuse football, although I don't want to talk about that team because they stink, but we'll figure it out. You're listening to WERW, Real College Radio, and the Chips Podcast. This is Pedals by Chromantics. We'll be back in a moment. All right, we got about 10 minutes left in the show. Tyler Melito joined, as always, by Ryan Amick. Chips Podcast on WERW, Real College Radio. We've talked football. We've talked baseball in the World Series. Now let's talk about something a little bit more depressing, and that is Syracuse football. They are 1-4 on the year. They just lost to Liberty by a score of 38-21 or something crazy like that. And now they take on the number 1 team in the country in Clemson, where they are 45.5-point underdogs on the road. A 0.6% chance of winning, according to ESPN Football Power Index. Ryan, just go ahead. Because I don't want to talk about this team
We weren't
anymore.
expected to beat Liberty either, and how'd that go? So you know what? At least they're not setting high expectations for this team, because why should we have high expectations? We should have the lowest of expectations, because nothing about the season has gone right. I mean, the amount of injuries this team has had has kind of been depressing, especially because the injuries come at such inopportune times. I mean, you look, obviously one of the biggest injuries of the season goes to Tommy DeVito, who went down against Duke last week. He'll be out for the remainder of the season. And that was just right when he was starting to get things clicking offensively. They won the week prior against Georgia Tech, had a great offensive showing. After scoring 1 touchdown the first 2 weeks of the season, Tommy DeVito went off against Georgia Tech, was playing great against Duke until he got injured. And Rex Culpepper has done a decent job filling in. He did good in relief efforts against Georgia Tech when he played sparingly there, or it might have been against Pitt, But his second game as a starter for Syracuse did not go great in terms of the outcome, obviously, losing 38-21 to Hugh Freeze's 5-0 Liberty Flames. So, I mean, that's a pretty good start for them, especially if you're a Liberty fan. But
So I just realized I forgot to turn the volumes back up on my mic. Thanks, Mom, for telling me that I am an idiot. So anyway, you missed what we were just talking about. We were just ranting on Syracuse football for a quick sec. Maybe for the best that y'all didn't hear that because it wasn't a lot of nice things. Ryan was nice.
Hey, it's accurate things. Though.
It is accurate.
I mean, you can't talk nice about a 1-4 team if there's nothing nice to talk about. Especially because a lot of the things, especially related to injury, it's out of their control, obviously, and it's unfortunate. But at the same time, Syracuse needs to learn how to adapt and change, and it doesn't look like they've done so because this loss against Liberty is so similar to the previous week's loss against Duke. Like, the run game, huge issue.
It's horrible.
Receivers, no one but Taj Harris can really get open and make plays for this offense, which is really struggling. More injuries just keep on piling onto this team, especially missing guys on the offensive line as well. I mean, just the offense, it's either looking great or it's looking awful. It's usually looking awful. And the defense, which has been one of the mainstays of this Syracuse team, has turned the ball over more than any other team in the past 2 years. Aside from that, the defense has struggled, especially recently against the run.
Yeah, and it hasn't looked good. Once again, Syracuse, they play Clemson this coming week in Death Valley, where Clemson is the number 1 team in the country, 45.5-point favorites. And they have Trevor Lawrence, the best player in the country, Travis Etienne, who is one of the top running backs in the country. Let's look at the college football rankings as of Week 8, because one interesting thing is the Big Ten is back. That's right, they start this week. So currently the college football standings look as follows. Clemson at 1, Alabama at 2, no surprise there. Notre Dame at 3, Georgia at 4, Ohio State at 5. Mind you, they have yet to play a game. They play Nebraska this weekend. Oklahoma State at 6, Texas A&M at 7, Penn State at 8, another team who is yet to play, Cincinnati at 9, who are 3-0, very shocking, and then Florida rounds out the top 10 at 2-1. Ryan, what are you most looking forward to this weekend and the rest of the season now that the Big Ten is back?
Yeah, I'm just looking for some of these teams to play some games because I'm looking at the rankings and there's so many 0-0 teams on this ranking. It's so weird because then, like, look at Ohio State, 0-0. They're above 3-0 Oklahoma State. Like, it makes sense, but it's just weird to look at because Oklahoma State's earned 3 victories on the year. Ohio State hasn't played, and yet they're ranked above them. So I'm just looking forward for the Big Ten to start playing again, especially because they have so many teams in this ranking. I mean, you have Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. I mean, there's so many Big Ten teams. This is a great conference. It hurt not having them play yet so far. Finally, they will be back this week and get some good football from them, especially Michigan, Minnesota, one of the premier matchups in the Big Ten this week. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the rankings, a lot of good teams on here, but really, I don't see any team on this list having a shot at either of the top 2 teams in the nation right now. Maybe Ohio State. Sure, you have to see them play first. That's the only thing keeping them out of that ranking. But aside from that, Alabama and Clemson have looked untouchable, and that's no different from the past 4 years in college football.
Here's the thing as it stands right now. Once again, 4 teams will make the college football playoff. It looks, barring something crazy, that it's going to be one ACC team between either Clemson and Notre Dame, because Notre Dame has joined the conference for the season. It's going to be one SEC team, either Alabama or Georgia, probably whoever wins the SEC championship. And then you got either Ohio State if they play well, or whoever is the Big Ten champion. And maybe whoever comes second in the ACC if it's Notre Dame or Clemson, Georgia or Alabama, whoever comes second there, or maybe Oklahoma State. It looks like it's going to be about a 6 to 7 team race for the college football playoff as usual. And it should be interesting to watch. I'm really excited to see Ohio State play this weekend against Nebraska because Justin Fields, he is the second best quarterback in the country, in my opinion, behind Trevor Lawrence. And I think he, with a good season, could really vault, A, his draft stock, and B, this Ohio State team getting him back to the national championship since they won it all in 2015.
Yeah, especially talking about draft stock, that's pretty important for Justin Fields. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence most likely is going to go number 1 overall. And then the other quarterback people have been talking about, Trey Lance at North Dakota State, he's not playing this year. He's opted out. He's opted out. He's going to focus on the draft. So if you're Justin Fields, you have the opportunity now to assert yourself as the second best quarterback in this draft class, maybe the second pick in the draft, especially when you look at teams like the Jets might be looking for a new quarterback in the draft.
Atlanta might be looking at
Atlanta might be. Washington already is moving off of Dwayne Haskins.
The Giants maybe, although unlikely. I don't think they should.
Yeah.
I think it would be actually interesting if Atlanta gets
Jaguars.
Jaguars.
Gardner's look decent, but they would not be opposed to taking a Justin Fields if he's available.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's important for him and his draft stock. And then also looking at some of the teams, you mentioned how some SEC teams maybe there'll be 2 SEC teams in the mix. I believe that will be the case, especially because the Pac-12 does not start their season for another month. And you look at the Big 10, or you look at the Big 12, namestays like Oklahoma not doing good this year. Texas, not doing good this year. Oklahoma State is really the only option they have right now. And if Oklahoma State loses 2 games, they might just be out of it.
Even if they lose 1 game, I think they have
no
shot.
That's a big loss because you have 3 SEC teams really that have a shot in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But Florida could definitely make a run for it, especially if they get wins over an Alabama or Georgia. Then all 3 of those teams are in the mix and in the hunt for 2 playoff spots, I believe.
Here's what's huge for Alabama. They beat Georgia last week handedly, 41-24. So I think the only way that Georgia gets its way into the top 4 is if they win the SEC over Alabama. If that's the only way. If Alabama wins it, it's going to be probably 1 SEC team, 1 ACC team in Clemson, and then Ohio State and maybe a Pac-12 champ or Big 12 champ in Oklahoma State. Unlikely. It's going to be interesting to see, nonetheless. But we're close. We got about 2 minutes left in the show. Ryan, any final thoughts before we put a bow on things for this week?
Definitely looking forward to baseball this week. Baseball heavy week.
Mm-hmm.
And by the next time we're on Chip's podcast, I don't think it'll be over because Game 6 will be the night of.
Right.
So I don't think the series will be over next time we're on air. But it could be. And if not, we'll just have a lot to talk about this World Series, which should be a good World Series. I mean, you have good pitching, good defensive teams. One team has better hitters than the other, but both teams on fire right now in terms of hitting and production in that sense. So this should be a very entertaining World Series to watch. And I really like the aspect of it being Tampa Bay and LA fighting again. Who's going to win more
Florida
titles
versus
this
Los
year.
Angeles. Another title. That's how it's going to be settled.
What was that?
Florida versus Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's literally that's all it's been is Florida and in California duking at it
outside of hockey,
in pro
it's
sports.
Dallas.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's it. One other final note is Tua Tagovailoa named the starter of the Miami Dolphins. We didn't even get to
that.
get
Yeah,
to
that's
that.
right. That's big news, and I'm very shocked at that because not only have the Dolphins won 2 straight and Ryan Fitzpatrick's been on fire, but so they have a bye this week, and then they're going to face the Rams. So Tua's first opponent is going to be Aaron Donald. That's an interesting thing to do, especially they're 3-3 right now. They currently second in the division, so they have playoff hopes, reasonably. So putting Tua in, sure, you would love to get your new toy out there, but Fitzpatrick's been throwing magic out all season long, so I'm a little surprised, but that's big news that happened just this morning. So.
Yeah. Should be very interesting indeed. Well, thank y'all so much for listening. You've been listening to the Chips Podcast here in WERW Real College Radio. We'll see you next week. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Melito. Have a great week. We're going to close you out with some Beers and Sunshine by Darius Rucker. Not a lot of sunshine here in Syracuse, a lot of rain, but we can only hope for some sunshine. Have a good one, everybody.